this hour. More than 150 people are reported to have been killed and scores injured after Israel launched airstrikes on Gaza City. The action intended to target Hamas has caused widespread destruction and civilian casualties. It comes just a week after the collapse of a truce between Palestinian militants and Israel. Well, for the very latest, we will cross now to Paula Sleer, who's on the Israeli-Palestinian border. Thanks very much for joining us, Paul. Now, these are some shocking pictures coming in from Gaza that we're seeing, which some viewers may find disturbing. Now, the number of casualties is expected to rise, isn't it? I mean, what do officials in Gaza say?
Well, that's correct. The number of dead and wounded have been rising dramatically throughout the course of the day. The latest figures we have from Gaza health officials put the number of dead at 155 people and more than 200 people who have been wounded. The hospitals in Gaza City cannot cope. We're hearing that people are still being brought in by the dozen. They're simply being laid out on the floor, and doctors are having to attend to patients while they're still lying on the ground. The doctors saying that they cannot tell the difference between those who are priority cases and those who are not. The situation is so desperate that Egypt has opened the border between Egypt and Gaza and is allowing for some of the injured to make their way through to the Egyptian capital, Cairo. Now, this follows just a day after Egypt beefed up its security forces along the Gaza-Egyptian border in anticipation of some kind of Israeli airstrike. As I speak to you, though, the panic continues in Gaza City. Plumes of black smoke continue to billow above Gaza. There are many parents who are still desperately trying to locate their children. The more than 30 Israeli missiles fired at Gaza fell while the school children were making their way out of school, and so it is expected that as we learn more about who are among the dead and wounded, the number of children and the number of civilians will increase. We do understand, though, that the head of the Gaza police security is confirmed as one of those who has died.
Now, the Israeli air raid came after Hamas militants shelled towns on the Israeli-Palestinian border. Is Israel planning more strikes at Gaza?
Well, certainly if we go according to the rhetoric that we're hearing coming from groups like Hamas and also the Islamic Jihad, which is another extremist group, they say that this morning's Israeli airstrike is a declaration of war, and that not only will they retaliate, but that the missiles they send back into Israel will reach further into Israeli territory. In fact, in the last half hour, there have been a number of Qassam rockets that have rained down on southern Israeli towns. We're hearing reports of one Israeli citizen killed and 4 so far confirmed to be wounded. It is expected that the number of Qassam rockets being fired at Israel will increase throughout the course of the day. Now, here in southern Israel, where I'm standing on the Israel-Gaza border, the sirens have been sounding and people have been warned to remain inside their homes, inside barricaded shelters, out of fear that the Hamas reaction, that the Hamas retaliation will increase.
So that's Hamas responding, potentially. What about Israel? Is it planning any more strikes? Are we going to get the ground forces perhaps moving in to Gaza?
Well, this is certainly some of the speculation that is making its way in the Israeli society at the moment. First of all, today's offensive was a big surprise. There is the weekly cabinet meeting that takes place on Sunday morning, and it was expected that only tomorrow would the Israeli cabinet give its final approval and go ahead for some kind of Israeli retaliation to what is happening in Gaza. These daily rockets that have been fired at Israeli cities, particularly in the last week since the Israel-Hamas ceasefire truce broke down. But what we're hearing now among Israeli government officials, and particularly from the Israeli Prime Minister's office, and I'm quoting a statement, they say that the operation will continue, it will be expanded, and it will deepen if necessary. We have, however, heard from the Israeli President Shimon Peres, who says that it would not be in Israel's best interest to re-enter Gaza, and that Israel has other things to occupy itself with right now rather than a return to the Gaza Strip. Some of the speculation here in Israel, however, is that all of this might be an attempt by Israeli politicians who are currently involved in their own internal politicking ahead of February elections here in Israel, that this might be an attempt simply to delay the elections and to refocus attention on who's who here in the Israeli society and which political leaders are able to exert their power and to really show that they are the true leaders of this Israeli society.
Okay, thank you for that update, Paula. RT's correspondent Paula Sleer reporting live from the Israeli-Palestinian border.